Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Gary Rads, and I'm here to talk with you this evening about the trying and cementation of lithium disilicate restorations. So for the next hour, I'll walk through with you what I know and what I've been doing for many years on creating a workflow that's smooth, consistent, and repeatable when you're getting ready to deliver lithium disilicate. So few notes you may want to take as you're listening tonight. One would just be my email address, and that's on the screen for you here. And you're welcome to take advantage of that. If you have any questions, I didn't explain something clearly, product name, whatever, feel free to use that. I do my best to respond within 24 hours, but I'm checking that email pretty consistently every day, all the time. So there we go. So just a little bit on me in case anybody really cares about the bio part. But I am in full-time general practice. I have practiced in the same location for over 25 years now in downtown Denver. Actually, this building behind that tree is where I am right now talking to you. So then here's a whole list of things that probably nobody cares about, but that's stuff I've done. Oh, there we go. So, yep, behind that tree, that's where I am right now. Okay, everybody's got to put family pictures in. So this is my family, and a bulk of our lives for the last 6-7 years has revolved around football and things involving football. So these guys I'm really proud of. That's back many years ago when I first started coaching them. And this picture right here is when the boys won their third Colorado football state title. So that was an exciting road to go through. And then my daughter has been on the sidelines with them the entire way. And she and her team have actually won a national championship last year. And then this year they placed third in nationals. So the boys had a pretty good run in football, and she's had a really good run with her dance team. And now this one right here, Brady, has continued to play football, and he is now playing at Colorado State. So I still have 4 or 5 more years of enjoying watching kids playing football. So that's kind of a bulk of our world and will be for the next few years. Anyway, subject of tonight is lithium disilicate. Okay, patient comes back, you've done your prep, you put them in a temporary, you're ready to put that in. And creating the workflow. And what I have found over the years is consistency is key to the game. So if you and your dental assistant know exactly what's going to happen and in what order, the chances of success are going to be much, much greater. And even more important, in this day and age, a lot of us have experienced turnover since COVID has happened and numerous other things. Having something and doing it consistently, and even doing to the point where you have to write it down when you get new team members in, is going to help you work faster and better. So tonight, I wanted to focus on lithium disilicate because that is one of the 2 most popular materials currently being used in dentistry today, with zirconia being the other. And the sequence for zirconia is a little bit different. So I wanted to segment this out and focus on lithium disilicate. And lithium disilicate is what Emax is made of. So many of you are using Emax, may or may not know that generically that is basically is lithium disilicate. But when we speak of, and I may even switch to this inadvertently, or just for ease, just refer back to Emax. But there are other lithium disilicate products out there currently than just Emax. Emax was first to the market, was a great product, has been marketed real well. Many of us have been successful with it for over a decade. So many of us recognize Emax, but may not recognize the lithium disilicate. But basically, Emax is the Kleenex, and lithium disilicate is the facial tissue. Okay, so there is a particular order in which to try and deliver these that is very repeatable and very successful. So we're going to walk through those steps today. And if you follow these steps, I can promise you from 10, 15 years of doing it this way, you will have far less issues that you can trace back to this part of what you're doing. Because it's pretty simple. It just has to be done in the correct order at the right time and paying a little bit of attention to detail as you're doing it. And there's no reason why you and your team working together can't repeat exactly what I'm going to show you this evening. So here's the steps we're going to go through: removing the temporaries, controlling the tissue and the fluid, cleaning the preps, trying in. And I'm mentioning the veneers here first, and I'll talk about that in just a second. What you need to do to the ceramic to get it ready to cement, the cementation process itself, and then discuss the cleanup. So what I'm going to walk you through is we're going to go through a veneer case of delivering some Emax veneers. So we're going to walk step by step through just one case that I did not that long ago and show you all the exact steps. And then when we get to the end, we'll talk about lithium disilicate crowns and bridges as well. But what we're really focusing on, because the steps don't change dramatically, what we're going to really focus on is this one veneer case so that we understand each step and the detail that goes with each step. Okay, so where we're picking up the process here in tonight's program is the patient's coming back for the delivery. Okay, so what are the steps at that appointment? We're not talking about preps and temporaries and impressions, okay? We're picking up at the patient comes back. This is a delivery appointment. So our first step is let's get the temporaries off. A majority of the time, we're going to anesthetize the patient first. Okay, and with the temporary veneers, lots of times I can just pop those off with a sickle scaler. Sometimes I have to section them with a handpiece and a burr. Be very careful not to touch the prep. But I need to get to this point. We've removed the temporaries, and now we're down to the prep tooth. So the very first thing we need to do before we try in anything is we need to clean that prepared tooth. Okay, because for a week, 2, 3, 4 weeks, you've had a temporary restoration in there. That temporary restoration probably has a little bit of leakage associated with it. There's a little bit of contamination probably on the tooth prep. Nothing bad, but we need to know that's there. We need to take that off. Also, as we're cleaning the preps, we're making sure no temporary material remains on the tooth surface. So in our office, after we've removed the temporaries, I want to clean off the tooth surface, and I'm going to use a plain pumice and a little disposable prophy cup. Now, traditionally, this plain pumice, you just put in a drop of water and create a slurry, put that on the prophy cup and start cleaning. One of the variations we've made in the last 5 years, we've started using a material called Hemoseal Inside, and we've replaced the water with the Hemoseal Inside. The reason for that is a couple-fold. The Hemoseal Inside contains chlorhexidine. So while we're doing the cleanup process here, we're also disinfecting that two surface, taking advantage of the chlorhexidine that's within the solution. The other benefit of this solution is the HEMA content acts as a desensitizer. So many of you have used glutaraldehyde, as a desensitizer and used it before placing a direct or indirect restoration. And certainly that solution works well, but glutaraldehyde on soft tissue is not the best combination. So when you're putting this in a rotary instrument using a prophy cup, you're spraying glutaraldehyde all over that patient's mouth. Probably not the best idea. Okay, the Hemoseal Inside and the solution contained within is very kind to the soft tissue. You won't get soft tissue burns. You won't get soft tissue irritation associated with the solution, but we still get that desensitizing effect. Also, again, as I mentioned, the chlorhexidine gives you a disinfecting property as well. So a couple drops of the Hemoseal Inside in the plain pumice, placed on a prophy cup, and we're going to start to clean the preparation, disinfect the preparation, and maybe even desensitize the preparation. So maybe just a little bit different what everybody's doing already, but you want to clean that prep. And again, these are all the reasons why we have switched over and used this material instead of water. There is actually, interestingly enough, because we're going to be talking about bonding when we get to the cementation part, there is some data showing that use of this material will enhance the bond strength when you go to etch, prime, and bond at the cementation stage. And then from a cost standpoint, this is significantly less than Gluma or even other glutaraldehyde products. So at this point, we've removed the temporaries and we have cleaned the preparations. We have checked to be sure. We've removed all the temporary material. Now, the next issue that we frequently see, and I see it probably as often as you guys do, is you take off the temporaries and that soft tissue does not look the way you'd like it to. Okay, it's inflamed, it's irritated. You know, patient hygiene is around temporaries can be questionable. I see it like you guys do. Patient goes back, oh, I was afraid to brush by my temporary. I was afraid it would come off. And now you've got a big bloody mess there you have to deal with. And it happens to me as well, you didn't clean off all the cement as well as you would have liked to. A little bit of excess cement has remained in the sulcus, and you've got some irritated tissue there. So before we try in anything, we've got to control the soft tissue. We've got to control any hemorrhage, any sulcular fluid leakage that's happening around the preparation. So we have a number of different choices on products we can use here. We can use hemostatic solutions, viscostat, similar. We'll talk about that in a second. Hemostatic paste, retraction cord, kind of a traditional method that many of us have used. Another option is using a diode laser. So let's dive into that a little bit. Okay, so the first thing I go to is a hemostatic solution like the Viscostat Clear. Because lots of times, if it's just a little bit of irritation, just a minor bit of bleeding, the Viscostat Clear or similar products will work great. It just takes, 10 seconds, rub on the solution, rinse dry, and that tiny little bleeder, we can get it stopped that way. Now, I do want to mention when we're talking about hemostatic solutions with lithium disilicate, because it's all ceramic in nature and there is some translucency involved, you want to use a solution that has aluminum chloride in it. Okay, you might not be able to read it, but right there it says aluminum chloride. So Viscostat Clear is a solution that contains aluminum chloride. Many other manufacturers of hemostatic solutions use aluminum chloride, but regular Viscostat and other hemostatic solutions have a ferric-based product in that solution. And you want to stay away from those because these ferric-based products, that iron that's in the solution can oxidize over time. And what can happen is you end up with a dark black staining on the tooth surface, the preparation part of the tooth surface, and that will show through the all ceramic. And you'll have a perfectly good, well done crown. You spend a lot of time on getting a good color match, and the patient comes back in 6 months and there's a little gray area or a little black spot showing up at the margin. And that's not because your restoration is leaking at the margin. It's because oxidation has occurred where the ferric-based solution did get entirely rinsed off, and that's just residual staining on the tooth, and you're not going to be able to get it off. Your only solution is going to be cut off the restoration. So, big word of caution, take a good close look at what solution, what hemostatic solution you're using, and what does it contain. It will either be ferric-based or it'll be aluminum chloride-based. You want to use aluminum chloride-based. Whether it's Viscostat Clear or a competitive company's product, doesn't matter to me. I just care about what's in it. Okay, so be sure you're checking that, because that can make a big aesthetic difference and a big headache for you. Okay, so number one, minor bleeding. I always try to use the hemostatic solution first. If that doesn't take care of it, many doctors, and I did for a long time, go to retraction cord. Okay, this is just a series of alternate products of retraction cords, but as you guys know, there's many others on the market. The problem with retraction cord, although it has the potential to stop bleeding, if you're trying to put in retraction cord around irritated tissue that's inflamed and bleeding, the mechanical process of placing the cord may cause more bleeding instead of less. And unless your technique is really good and the bleeding is really minor, the use of retraction cord is probably the last place you want to go in this day and age. Again, back when I started a long time ago and we didn't have the technology we have now, yeah, we would fight the battle and put in retraction cord and the retraction cord with epinephrine like these over here in hopes of controlling the bleeding in the sulcular area. Anymore, we really don't need that. And the reason we don't need that is about 20 years ago, a product called Expasil came on the market. And this is a paste material that's impregnated with aluminum chloride in kind of a putty sort of mixture that's injected around the sulcus. And the aluminum chloride that's impregnated in this putty does have a hemostatic effect. So for many years, Expasil was the only thing on the market, and certainly a really good material. It was technique sensitive. It was hard to use. It's definitely improved over the years. As it's improved, other competitors have come on the market. Traxident has been very popular for a number of years. About 8 years ago, 3M came out with a competitive product that works really well. About a year or two ago, I found, well, back up a second. Let's talk about Expasil first. So this is the Expasil in the original gun with the original cartridge, with the original paste. A number of you may have used that in the past. The trouble with this back in the early days is these cartridges, lots of times you get a cartridge where the paste had dried out to the point where you couldn't extrude the product out the tip. And actually, I exploded a couple of cartridges because the material had set up inside there. Well, Expisil recognized the issue. They've adjusted the chemistry and recently have come out with a unidose version of what they used to sell in these cartridges. And this has been a significant improvement. Certainly a really good product right now. That being said, about a year ago, Voco introduced a product they creatively called retraction paste. And this product works every bit as good as the Expisil, maybe better, and the pricing may be better. And this, for the last year, has been my go-to product for retraction paste. So here you can see where I used it just a few weeks ago. I've got 4 veneers. I've taken off the temporaries. I've used a little bit of hemostatic solution. I've got some control of the sulcular fluid, but I still want to get better control. So this is the Voco retraction paste. And I just leave it in there a minute, maybe 2. And then you can see over here, after we've rinsed it off, I get a little bit of retraction, but you can see where the area has dried out just a little bit more. So I've got a lot better control over this area as I'm getting ready to do my try-in, followed by my cementation. And then the last option, and it's kind of the option of last resort, if I can't use the hemostatic solution and I can't use the retraction paste to get that bleeding under control, that's when I pick up my diode laser. I turn my energy down to the bare minimum, and I just use a light touch and kind of a spot touch, trying to cauterize and isolate where that hemorrhage is coming from. And I use the diode to try to do that. I want to keep the energy down because I don't want to remove any of the soft tissue. I want just enough energy to create a little bit of heat to cauterize those little capillaries that are spitting out some blood cells. Okay, so the diode is last resort. I really don't want to use it if I don't have to. If I need to, yeah, I know that's going to stop the bleeding for sure. But especially with anterior restorations, I don't want to risk losing any soft tissue and exposing a margin. Okay, so for me, 90–95% of the time, hemostatic solution, retraction paste. And that should get me the soft tissue, the fluid control I need to get to the next point, which is trying in the restorations. So when we go to try in the restorations, because lithium disilicate does have some translucency to it, I want to try the restorations in using a try-in paste, because the color of your cement can have an effect on the color of your final restoration. Okay, so here are my restorations on the model. And then with your resin cements, many of them have try-in paste. This happens to be Bisco's Choice 2 veneer cement. This is a light cured resin cement. And within this kit, there are color matching try-in pastes that match the shades of the final cement. And I want to use the try-in paste because that's going to show me what the color of my cement, what kind of effect the color of cement will have on the final restoration. But also the nice thing about the try-in paste is they will create a little bit of retention for the restoration while I'm evaluating it and I'm letting the patient look in the mirror and the patient's evaluating it. So it gives a little bit of stick to the tooth to make that try-in part and the aesthetic evaluation part a little bit easier. So these are the restorations tried into place. So I'm evaluating fit, margins. I'm looking on the lingual side, making sure I'm happy with how everything fits there. And then at this point, I'll hand the patient a mirror and say, okay, this is what they're going to look like when we get done. Do you see any changes you want to make? Are you good for us to go to the next stage of cementing these into place? And this is an important part in an anterior case, because if the patient wants any changes, we need to know now, because some changes I can make in the mouth, other changes have to go back to the lab. And with an anterior case, I will not cement it until the patient has given me verbal and written approval that they've had a chance to look at it, they're happy with it, and they're giving me approval to cement these into place. So now, assuming we've got the patient's approval, we need to get the ceramic ready to be cemented. So this is a really important part that I think is too often not paid close attention to. Okay, so these steps are critical for the long-term success of that restoration. So we remove the Emax veneers from the mouth. We set them on the counter. So the first thing we do is we're just going to rinse off the triumph paste. All of these triumph pastes are water soluble. So just an air water spray, aggressively rinse off the triumph paste. Now we need to decontaminate the internal aspect of these veneers. Back in the old days, we had one of two ways of doing this. One way, and the way I grew up doing it, is I'd use phosphoric etch in the internal aspect of the veneers, not to etch the veneers, but rather phosphoric etch is actually a really good detergent. Okay, so I'm not etching the veneers. That happened at the lab. But I'm using the phosphoric etch to clean out any contamination we picked up during trying. Blood, saliva, any of the intraoral proteins that are floating around. That's on your porcelain at a microscopic level that can negatively affect your final bond strength. So we want to get rid of that. Okay, the other old school way of doing it is you would put the veneers in isopropyl alcohol and you put it in the ultrasonic for 90 seconds. Both these techniques still work. I did it for many, many years in the early days of placing veneers. But the new school way is using one of these two products, and there's probably others on the market, but these are the two I'm familiar with. Bisco makes a product called Zirclean. Now, from the name, you can tell is designed for cleaning zirconia. However, this material and the solution it contains does a great job on lithium disilicate as well. So we use that product. One, I like the cost. I like the syringe for the delivery part. The syringe tip allows us to be really accurate, especially with the smaller restorations. The other option, and this one probably came out a little bit earlier, is Ivoclean. And the appeal there is Ivoclean made by Ivoclar, who makes Emax. So if anybody knows how to treat lithium disilicate, Emax is going to be the company that makes it. So Ivoclar made this product specifically for this purpose of decontaminating the internal aspect of lithium disilicate. So either one of these products, but you want to use any of the four techniques I showed you. But the modern, easy way of doing it is one of these two products on your screen. And then the last thing we're going to do, so with the Zirclean or the Ivoclean, you're going to put that on the porcelain, on the internal aspect, the part you're going to cement, and you're going to leave it there for about 30, 45 seconds, and then just an aggressive air water spray. And then you want to dry that. And then the last thing we're going to do before we cement these into place is we're going to re-silinate the internal aspect of those restorations. Now, at the lab, your lab should be silinating the restorations before they send them back to you. Double check with your lab, but any good lab should be doing that already. But the idea behind resilinating is, one, it can't hurt. And two, it may increase your bond strength 10 to 20%. So resilination is easy. You just take the silene. Your silene should be in 2 bottles because it's a very volatile solution. It's going to be in 2 bottles. You put 1 drop, mix it up. And then the picture on the right is inaccurate. I use a brush, not a bottle. I'm going to use the brush to take the 2, part A, part B, that have been mixed together, and I'll use a brush to apply that to the internal aspect. And I want to let that dry about 30 to 60 seconds on its own. And then we're going to aggressively air dry that. Now the restorations are ready to be cemented to place. All right, so the cementation part, we have isolation, and then we're going to etch, bond, and then we'll show you how we're going to sequence these as we cement them into place. Now, the one part that I missed and I don't have a picture of, after the try-in, as we're preparing the veneers on the countertop, either myself or my assistant is going to go back to that prophy cup and the plain pumice with the hemoseal inside in it, and we are going to re-clean the preparations, getting off all the try-in paste that we tried in before. And when we're doing that, we're also paying attention to see, do we get any areas of hemorrhage? Because if the tissue is really irritated and we're having trouble controlling the hemorrhage during the try-in part, as we're checking margins or checking contacts, we may create some more hemorrhage. So we want to go back. And I guess this would actually go up to the isolation part, is we're getting the area ready for cementation and we're isolating the area. We're double checking for hemorrhage. Okay. And if we're seeing any hemorrhage, we go back to our retraction paste or our hemostatic solution and control that. Really important at this part, because you don't want to get to the etch part and find out you got a bleeder. Okay. So while the ceramic's being prepared on the countertop on the side, which is going to take 3-5 minutes, depending how many restorations you have. Okay. Either the assistant or the dentist is in there cleaning the preps and making sure we've got great control of the soft tissue. Okay, so we've got the area isolated. We've re-cleaned the preps. We have checked to make sure we don't have any bleeding areas. If we did, we've taken care of that. Now with the veneers, we're going to do a total etch. Okay, so we're going to place all of our etch, let that go about 20-30 seconds. And then our bonding agents, we have a lot of different options, but right now, and probably for the last 5 to 8 years, universal bonding agents, like the All Bond Universal, is what most of us are now using. But we're going to use this in the total etch mode for veneers, because with your veneers, you've got a lot of enamel that you're going to bond to, and the bond strength of any universal bonding agent is stronger on enamel if you etch it first. Okay, these will work in a self-etch mode, but the bond strength to enamel that's been etched is stronger than the bond strength to enamel using a self-etch bonding agent. Okay, so that's why we've etched this one first. Okay, now we're going to apply the universal bonding agent for a good 30 seconds, 40 seconds. Air thin it, light cure it. Oh, here we are. Okay, so we're rinsing off the etch, placing our universal bonding agent, and you can see there's a liberal coating of the bonding agent here. That's fine. You want to soak the teeth in the bonding agent. And then 20, 30 seconds after the application, you're going to aggressively air thin that. And then we'll light cure each tooth 10 to 15 seconds. That's all you're going to need. Okay, so let's talk about the cements. For veneers, my personal preference is I'm going to use a light cure resin cement. And the reason I like light cure is, one, the veneers are so thin, I'm confident that a good curing light will penetrate through the porcelain and completely bond or completely cure my light cured resin cement. The advantage of a light cure resin cement over a dual cure, which we'll talk about in a second, is working time. You have a little bit longer working time with a light cured resin cement. And because, as you can see in this particular case, I'm cementing all 6 veneers at the same time, a little bit of extra working time can help me ensure that I've got the veneers completely seated. I can evaluate the fit. I can clean off. I've got time to clean off excess cement before I do the final light cure. Okay, so that's my personal preference. The other option is a dual cure resin cement. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. These are 3 of them. This is a light cure resin cement, the choice 2. But the Nexus 3, Calibra, the Dual Link, VariaLink, Ivoclar's is very popular. 3M's dual cure resin cement, real popular. These absolutely can be used. My only issue with these is with a dual cure material. Now, as soon as you start to extrude it, you're on the clock. And if you're putting in multiple restorations, you may get to that last restoration and your cement's starting to set up and you may not get a complete seat. And that's my only problem with these. Okay, the shade shifting argument, concern that's been around the industry for many years, according to the manufacturers of many of these products, these that I mentioned and others, they are telling us they have chemically resolved the issue of shade shift over time. So I know it's a concern to some. The companies say they have addressed the concern. It no longer exists. In my world with veneers, I'm not worried about it anyway because I'm using a light cured resin instead. Okay. That being said, if you like dual cure resin cements and you've got your favorite and that's how you want to put in your veneers, that's great. Just understand the clock's ticking as soon as you start to extrude that, and you got to work fast. Okay. So I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying understand the limitations that exist. Okay, the other thing I want to note when we're talking about cements is in the industry, almost every manufacturer of a resin cement now has a self-etch, self-adhesive dual cure resin cement. Many of these exist on the market. These are really good materials, but if you read in the instructions for use on any of them, okay, all these on the screen and every other one made, one of the contraindications you'll see is do not use these for veneers. The reason for that is these self-etch, self-adhesive dual cure resins do not have as good a bond strength as your light cure or dual cure resins. And, excuse me, with veneers, because you have no retention and resistance for them, the bond strength is the weak link on your veneers. So you want to use what's going to give you the highest bond strength when you're placing a veneer. So although these are really good to use at the right time, and we'll actually talk about it before we get done tonight, these are contraindicated materials for veneers. Okay. So I'm not saying don't use these. These are great materials. I just used Theracem 2 hours ago to put in a crown. These are great materials in the right situation, but veneers are the wrong situation. Do not use any of these materials or anything similar when you're placing a veneer. Okay, so that's just my light cure resin being loaded into the veneer. Lots of them on the market. Again, this is just the choice 2 material. All right, so I'm going to take the centrals. I'm going to seat them to place one at a time. I'm cleaning up this excess with a cotton roll. And then I follow it up with a micro brush like you use for your bonding agent. So I'm going to get off as much. I think I got a picture of it. Here we go. I'm going to get off as much of the excess cement as I can while I'm seating these to place. And then before I light cure, I place my fingers here and here. And I have my assistant using a tacking tip on a curing light. And she'll put it right there. And we're going to light cure that for 5 seconds. And then we're going to move over here. Whoops. We're going to move over here. We're going to clean up any excess cement we see at the margin. I'm going to put my fingers right here, hold these to place, tack cure that for 10 seconds. Okay, and then we go here and here and here. And once we've tack cured everything, cleaned up all the visible cement we can with a brush, now she will light cure front and back. 30 seconds each on each tooth to ensure we've got a full cure. Okay, now we're at a point, all we need to do is do our finishing and polishing. So we've already removed the gross excess cement. Using fine diamonds and a number 12 scalpel blade, we're going to go around the margins and on top of the papilla and get rid of any more excess cement. Once we've gotten rid of all the cement, now we're going to repolish the margins, both facially and interproximally. And the last thing we'll do is finish up with some polishing paste at the margins. Okay, now this picture is a little bit out of sequence. Clinically, I would have removed all of this cement that you can see here with a 16 fluted carbide. This is where the number 12 scalpel blade right here will get rid of this cement right on top of the papilla. Okay. And once all of that's gone, the number 12 scalpel blade is really good just to run right through here. It'll pop off that little bit of excess cement. And then the last thing I do to be sure I've got separation is I use something called a series saw made by Denman. It just looks like a little plumber's hacksaw. Excuse me. The blade looks like this. It's got a serrated edge. The sides of this metal strip are polished metal. Okay, there's no abrasive on there. And this will pop right through once you've gotten rid of all this excess cement. Okay, once you've got the separation, you can get in there with floss. Any excess, if the floss is shredding, I use aluminum oxide finishing strips, Epitex by GC or what I use, but there's a lot of others on the market. If you have something that's really shredding and the Epitex aren't getting it off, a fine diamond strip. Okay, these are too abrasive, but a fine diamond strip, brass or SS white, and anybody who makes burrs makes finishing strips like this. But using that fine diamond strip, I'll get rid of any little excess cement, and then I'll go back and polish it with the aluminum oxide strips. And then the final polish, 30 fluted carbides at the margin. Any place I use the fine diamond to get rid of cement, a 30 fluted carbide will start to repolish porcelain. And then follow that up with porcelain polishing paste on a Profi cup. Say that 3 times fast. And when you do all that correctly, the patient comes back for a 2-week post-op, and your tissue should look like that. Back up. Okay. So that is step by step by step by step for delivering lithium disilicate porcelain veneers. So the beauty and the simplicity of the process I just showed you is when you go from veneers to crowns and bridges, everything stays the same until you get to the point of what am I going to cement with? So every single step I showed you for the veneers, you're going to do exactly the same thing for a crown or a bridge. Okay. The difference is when you get to the cementation part, what cement are you going to choose? And really, the cementation choice, you're going to have 2 choices of categories of cement. And that decision really comes down to the retention and the resistance form of your crown prep. Okay. So if you have axial walls where your taper is minimal and those walls are really tall and you've got great retention and resistance form, okay, you've got 2 options on cements to choose. If your retention and resistance form is compromised, either your prep is short and or your walls are really tapered, now you really only have one choice on what kind of cement to use. So where's that take you? If you have excellent retention and resistance form, you can use a dual cure resin cement, or you can use any of these newer self-etch, self-adhesive resin cements. Okay? Either one should work fine. Okay, now it becomes your choice. A lot of people default to these self-etch, self-adhesive resin cements because of the ease of use. And the technique sensitivity is lower, the cleanup can be easier. Okay, if you've got really good retention and resistance form, you are totally okay to use this. But if your retention and resistance form is compromised, that crown is being held in large part due to the bond strength of your bonding agent and your cement. And it's documented that dual cure resin cements categorically, okay, I've got 2 Bisco products up here, but I'm talking about entire category. Categorically, if you etch, prime, and bond and use a dual cure resin cement, you are going to get better bond strength than if you just go to a self-etch, self-adhesive resin cement. Okay? Every single time. So when I've got a prep and it's short and I'm seeing, a prep where I'm tapered more than I would like to have been, I want to get the absolute maximum bond strength I possibly can. And that's going to come from etch, prime, bond. Well, prime and bond is now one thing with the universals, but I'm going to etch, prime, and bond, and I'm going to use the dual cure resin cement to get the maximum bond strength to help hold that into place as best I can. But that is the only difference when we're talking about crowns and bridges versus veneers. Otherwise, all of your steps stay exactly the same. Okay? So those are the things you want to keep in mind. That's the sequence you want to set up. And if you have newer dental assistants coming in as you get staff turnover, you can take what we talked about here. You can write down 10 or 12 bullet points of what we're going to do step by step by step and do it every time. And then the only thing that's going to change is when you get to your choice of cements. Are you going to use a light cure resin cement? Okay, that's a good idea, but only for veneers. Are you going to use a dual cure resin cement? Okay, you can use that on your veneers. You can use it on your crown and bridge. Are you going to use a self-etch resin cement? Good idea on your crowns and bridges with really good retention and resistance form. Okay, so in my office, I've got all 3 categories of cements. My assistant knows I'm going to pick one of the three, and she'll have those ready. Now, if you're trying to reduce inventory and just get to one cement that you're using all the time, you want to get a dual cure resin cement. Okay, that's the one cement that can be universal across all lithium disilicate. All right. But you lose some of the advantages of the self-etch, self-adhesive resin cements that you may want to take advantage of at some point in time. Okay, so your dual cure resin cements, if you just want one cement, that could be a universal product for you. All right, but if you want to look at different situations and pick the most ideal cement for the given situation, then you want to have one cement in each of these three categories available to you. Don't need that as I'm finishing up here. So, go back, look through your notes. And again, you may want to just write this down and just type out a worksheet and just have it available. And it's sitting in a drawer someplace for as you get newer team members. You can say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do it like this. We're going to do it every time. When we get to the cement part, it just asks me which one we're going to use. Okay. But if you follow this workflow, when you're cementing lithium disilicate, you are going to have really good success all the time. And if you have issues, you know that you can go back to your workflow. And if you know you followed it, any issue you might be having, you're not going to trace back to the try-in and cementation part. Okay, those issues are going to be someplace else. But if you consistently do the same thing step by step every time, you're going to see greater and greater success. So with that said, that's an awful lot to cover in an hour. I wanted to leave a little bit of time for some questions here. Let me pop those up. Okay. I've only got a couple minutes. I'll get through what I can. Do you ever use a drying agent, i.e. acetone, prior to silinating the restorations? The answer is no. This is a good question. Is it true that when using a dual cure resin cement that you are supposed to wait for the self-cure part of the curing to take place before light curing? Actually, a good idea. It certainly can't hurt. It only costs you a few minutes. So your dual cure resin cements, they'll get to 90% of their final cure probably in about 4 to 5 minutes. So it certainly can't hurt you to do that. A more interesting aside to this question is if you're using a self-etch, self-adhesive resin cement, you do want to wait, because the self-etch, self-adhesion part of those cements needs to have a little bit of time for that chemical reaction to take place. So if you're using a self-etch, self-adhesive resin cement, you want to put that restoration into place, clean off the excess cement, and then hold that to place for about 4 to 5 minutes before you light cure to allow for that time to happen. Okay, another question, but what about resin-modified glass ionomer cement? At this time, I personally, the manufacturers of the cements may say different, but with lithium disilicate, I would not use resin-modified glass ionomer cement. The bond strength associated with those, although it exists, is not that strong. So resin-modified glass ionomer cement with zirconia, not a bad idea. I actually do that. But with lithium disilicate, with Emax, that's not something I would currently do. What would you do differently for the cementation of a zirconia crown? I would stay tuned for a future lecture that I'm going to do or others, because there is a little bit of difference between zirconia and lithium disilicate, and that's another hour lecture. So good question. Glad you're aware that there is some differences there, but unfortunately, I don't have time to cover that. Already answered that question. Okay, last question. Could you repeat what type of cement is best for porcelain veneers? My personal opinion, cement for porcelain veneers, I like light cured resin cements. The example I showed here was the Choice 2 by Bisco. But as a category, I like the light cure better because I have more working time as I'm going to clean to be sure I fully seated the restoration to place, and B, to give me more cleanup time of the excess cement. All right, folks, with that one, I am out of time. I would remind you, my email is right here on the bottom of the screen. If you have further questions, feel free to get back to me, and I will do my best to get back to you within 24 hours. But I thank everybody for joining me tonight. It's always good talking to you, and best of luck. Have a good evening.